Congressman Ryan, it is so good to have you and to see you again and to have you in this very important election year. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We go way back. I think you came to the second Wisdom 2.0, which was probably about 10 years ago. John Kabat-Zinn told me, hey, there's this amazing politician. His name is Tim Ryan. I'm like, John, we don't really do politicians. Politicians, they talk about themselves. They're trying to get things. And he's like, no, this is a different guy. This is a different kind of guy. And it was such a great decision to kind of bring you in. And your books, A Mindful Nation and the other books have just been incredible, and I just a deep bow to you for being such a strong advocate for mindfulness in politics, which a lot of people are like, no, the way, those can't exist. But just a big, deep thanks and bow to you for all the work you've done over the years.
Thank you. Well, they have to exist together or we're not going to make it. So I guess that's...
How is your assessment of our country at this a really critical time? What do you think, or what do you see as our kind of learning points? How are you doing? Do you feel hopeful? Do you feel not hopeful? Do you feel like we're making progress? Do you feel like we're getting pulled back?
Coincidentally enough, I feel semi-hopeful. I mean, here we are. I think there's about to be a lot of change, but the country right now is just gripped into fear, into anger, for a variety of different reasons. I think everybody has their own reason, and then it just kind of gets merged together. But there's a lot of economic anxiety, cultural anxiety, anxiety around race, anxiety around communities of color and their relationship to the law enforcement, retirement security, our relationship internationally with China and Russia and globalization, and then automation and all that is doing to displace workers. And so it's all kind of coming together, and all the while, we're trying to assimilate so many cultures into what is the great melting pot, the United States. This is a pretty tough task. Yeah. And reasons to be fearful and reasons to be angry. I represent a district in Northeast Ohio that, used to be many decades ago the highest per capita income in the country, and we lost industry, we lost steel, we lost auto. And so there's a lot of people that the American dream isn't alive for them. At least that was the perception. And I think to some degree it still is. So that's all coming together now. So we are divided, and now it's, I think we are bottoming out, and it's time to start reassembling, maybe in a new way. And I'm hoping that is grounded in things like the things you talk about a lot, Soren, and that your conferences are about: connection, compassion, caring about each other, being aware of really what the root causes of a lot of these problems are, not the symptoms that we deal with a lot in politics, but how do we reevaluate and get into the root cause? So within all the fear and anger, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I'm hopeful that we're going to take advantage of it.
It seems like there's a couple different parts. One is the part that I see, like on mindfulness, awareness, compassion, wisdom. How do we create more human connection in an age where we get a lot of inflammatory statements from different political leaders, and all of a sudden we have this super negative idea about our neighbor who might actually be a decent person and just think a little bit differently than us. And so I feel like that's kind of a part. And then the other part that I see is kind of like, what is the Democratic Party now? And has the Democratic Party maybe kind of got lost a little bit and needs to kind of revision and rebrand or reboot itself to be more closely connected to the working class people, and to see that tech is wonderful, but it also has dangers to it. And we need to look at that as a society and make sure we're aligned. And so I'm curious, like, how do you feel like we can create more of that sense of we, both in the Democratic Party, but also in the nation?
Well, it starts by trying to reconnect. I don't think it could be done from afar. It needs to be up close and personal. I have always thought that politics was very, very personal. And I think that people have to show up, and we are we've gone through some political cycles in the recent history where, major political candidates didn't show up. They didn't go to the communities that were left behind. They didn't go to the communities that they didn't think were going to vote for them. And it's really true on both sides. And so starting with the idea that we care about you, we want to have dialogue. I think it's important really to recognize, and I by all accounts would be considered a Democrat. Many would think a progressive Democrat, sometimes not progressive enough, but not moderate enough. It depends on who you're talking to, but you've got to sit down with both political parties, because the solutions to climate change, the solutions to our economic troubles, inequality, income disparity, communities that have been left behind, the solutions are going to be both private sector solutions. I mean, we're not going to reverse climate change without massive investments from private industry. Yeah. But at the same time, we're not going to plug the communities in that have been left behind, like some of the ones I represent, without some public investment too, to clean the neighborhoods, build broadband, pave the streets, build the schools, pay the teachers, have healthcare for everybody. So it's really kind of that balance somewhere in the middle. And we've gotten away from that. It's like, you've got it, in Washington and many parts of the country, you said, talking about your neighbors, like either government can do everything or the private sector can do everything. And there's no point in between. And that's just not reality. So it starts with connecting. It starts with really honest conversations, whether they're economic or around things like Black Lives Matter and law enforcement. Those all have to start with really, really raw, honest conversations. And you're going to have Black people in Wisconsin or Minneapolis say, people don't understand what we're going through. And they're going to have a list of really good reasons why white people don't understand what they're going through. And then you're going to have white people in a place like Youngstown, Ohio, or Western PA, or Michigan, or Wisconsin, that will say, you're a 55-year-old white man, and that you're going to say, people don't understand what I'm going through. And that's not to diminish either of them, but someone who was making $35 an hour and could feed their family and now is making $15 an hour, they feel cheated too. And so these are all honest issues that we need to deal with. And what we have to do is open our hearts to each of those groups of people who feel like the American dream isn't there for them, the justice system isn't there for them, the economy isn't there for them. It all starts with the conversation, and then the policies will flow from those conversations.
Yeah, great, beautiful. And how do you feel like we can address issues? I mean, and part of what I've been trying to be about, I know we've been trying to be about, is like, how do we promote a culture of mindfulness, of human connection, of compassion, of empathy, of fairness? And you look at the economic situation, you look at, I think, Jeff Bezos made 100 billion or something during the COVID, or some crazy number.
Slightly more than me and you, right?
Yeah. And so where does fairness exist in that? And he's not, as far, not breaking any laws. I mean, they're all living by the rules that we have, right? It's not like they're doing anything wrong. But at the same time, that wealth gap is getting almost bizarrely distance, such that people live incredibly different lives. How do you think we even begin to grasp that? Because I feel like part of the energy behind Trump's last election was like, oh, I'm gonna stand for you, right? I'm gonna be behind you. I'm gonna be for the worker. I'm gonna get better trade laws. I'm gonna get better these. And yet the system seems to be run in a way that supports a certain percentage of our population and doesn't the others. Is that how it seems to you? And what would be some of the acupuncture points, or what would be some of the places that we could come into that could create more fairness and more equity?
Yeah, I mean, that was Trump's real jujitsu move. I mean, he basically connected to those workers that I mentioned earlier, and said, this economy hasn't worked for you. The elites have screwed you. China has screwed you. Everyone has screwed you. And I'm the guy that can fix it because I'm a rich business guy. And there was enough people who, in those Midwestern states, who felt that way and felt that both parties had let them down, that they took a chance on Trump. and he got elected. And then what did he do as soon as he got in? He cut taxes for the wealthiest people in the country, and tried to dismantle healthcare for the vast majority of Americans. So he knew what to say, and he knew how to campaign. He knew intuitively, I think, what would resonate, but then the policies didn't change at all. So there's a concentration of wealth. There's always a concentration of wealth in a capitalistic system. That's just what unfettered. That's just what happens. And so what we've always done in the past is we would ask those people who are making billions of dollars to pay significantly more in taxes. And it was the income tax, it was the corporate tax, it was an estate tax. If you tried to pass, as Bezos tries to pass this down to his kids, that the government and the public would share in that. And then you take that money and you reinvest back into infrastructure, education, research and development, college education, job training, all the rest, to really help lift up everybody from the bottom and into the middle class. And we've stopped doing that since 1980. And again, it's like, but the conversation can't be, Soren, you hate rich people. Well, I don't hate rich people. I'm taking a step back here and looking at the big picture. And if you got a guy that makes $100 billion in 6 months and pays less in taxes than his secretary pays, I would think that the vast majority of people would think that that's not a good idea. So those are the kind of issues that we've got to focus on addressing. And the innovation, we can't be afraid of the innovation. We've got to bring innovation to government. We could, go through the whole list of things where the knowledge that we've gained in the last 20 years from the research in mindfulness, the research in post-traumatic stress, the brain science that your Wisdom 2.0 conferences are just filled with those doctors and those researchers, that we've not taken that, whether it's food, when you talk about Mark Hyman and food as medicine, whether it's regenerative agriculture, whether it's the brain science with Richie Davidson and our understanding of trauma and all of that. And we've not converted that yet into broad-based policies in the United States. And my hope is that with the Wisdom 2.0 crew and kind of the national movement around this stuff, is that when we hit the reset button in a few months, that those policies begin to take hold, because those are the ones that are going to shift. Teaching social and emotional learning in the schools, teaching respect for the soil, reversing chronic disease using healthy food as medicine. Like, those are just three off the top of my head that would completely transform the country. And so the key is going to be for all of us to be active as we move into this next version of America.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so we're coming up to a really important day. Everybody can vote. Everybody can go to timryan.com, I'm sure, and get a part of your newsletter list and kind of follow you on Twitter and follow you on social, so they can kind of get updated on what you're doing and what you're seeing. Other actions that we can do in this kind of very short time that you could suggest. It feels like there's this really important election day coming. And then after the election day, there's going to be a really, really important couple months after that, just like you said, where it's really going to be time to speak, to kind of share our voices and see if we can initiate some of these things that are just win for everybody. It's a win for the environment. It's a win for workers. It's a win for our children. And so I'm super excited that that's going to happen, but wondering also if you have any suggestions for people now as we kind of enter this last lap of the election cycle.
Yeah, I like to say to all my yogi friends, visualize and then organize. You can't just sit on your mat and visualize and manifest. You got to go out and you got to organize. You got to do the work. Yeah. It's an honor to be in the United States. It's an honor to be in a democracy, a democratic republic, where we're able to have that kind of influence all over the country. Soren, there are phone banks that are happening, virtual phone banks, text banks, where you can actually, spend the night texting people, targeted people that the organizers in different states have come up with. Those are two things off the top of my head that I think are really, really important, because they can move the needle a little bit. And I think people are wanting to go in a certain direction here. I think they're wanting to hit the reset button, want more kindness, want more connection, want more of the things that we're talking about here. And to me, that's going to be very, very important, and it's got to start now. We're just a few days out, so
Yeah.
we got to make it happen.
Yeah. And, one of the things that we've been wanting to kind of promote or support is that if you look at candidates, why not consider kindness as one of those qualities that you would want to consider in choosing, right? Who you vote for. You want
Right.
somebody smart, you want somebody who's experienced, you want somebody who has good vision, and yet quality of being. And you look at people, or I look at people like John McCain, and I didn't always agree with him, but I had so much respect for him. And he stood up for Obama when people would have negative views of Obama.
Yeah.
He would stand up and say, no, that's not a healthy way to look at it. And so for me, my hope is we kind of enter this new chapter would be that we can make kindness, decency, honesty a norm again. And I look to you to stand for that, and I look to other people to stand for that. But do you think that's where we're going? Do you think we can kind of turn the tide where it seems like meanness, hatred seem to win at one point? Do you think we can turn
Well,
that?
I think, yeah, I think that's happening. I think it's been slowly happening. And then I think in the last 10 days, 2 weeks,
Mm,
given everything that happened with the debate, with the president getting COVID-19, how he handled that. I
mm,
had I just heard a story from a good friend who knows this person, very conservative Republican, voted that way his or her whole life, pro-life in Southern Ohio. And that's a very personal position that she holds and has for a while. And when the president got out of Walter Reed and went to the White House and took off his mask and walked into the House, subjecting his employees to his positive uh, uh, COVID, she says, I'm voting for Biden. She says,
yeah,
I can't, I mean, I have never done this before, but that to me was whatever crossed that line.
yeah,
And what's at the heart of that? It's like kindness, like
yeah,
respect, the general like appreciation for the concerns of somebody else.
yeah,
And so I think, regardless of your politics right now, it's like there's this old, and you hear the business guys too that come to the conference, and the old business saying, and Benioff says it, and all
mm,
of these guys that culture eats strategy for breakfast, I think is the saying.
mhm,
And it's the same with politics. Like culture will eat policy,
yeah,
for lunch all day long. And so we keep talking about policy this and policy that. When the culture is divided, you're not going to get policies that bring people together. So our real mission is, how do we help shift the culture and to bring that togetherness, that fellowship, that connection. And that happens through voting for kindness, because you're
mhm,
going to vote for someone who's going to be willing to have those conversations we talked about earlier, because there's going to be a general respect for what the other person's
yeah,
opinions are, even if they're different than your own. And so when you talk about voting kindness, you're talking about really voting for someone who's willing to engage, someone who's willing to have a conversation, someone who is willing to understand that these problems are very, very complicated, very complex. I think we have a voting block of people, for the most part, not everybody, but young people growing up today, it's like, man, that's kind of complicated. Free
yeah,
trade, kind of complicated. Globalization, not so black and white. Automation, there's upsides, there's downsides. Like this is just really complicated. Taxes on the rich, yeah, but we don't want to drive investment out of the country either.
right,
So they're all of these are just so complicated, and
yeah,
politicians tend to try to make them, simple to be digestible. But at the same time, I think more and more people are recognizing that these are complex issues, and we need to sit down and use all the best brain power we have, all the
mhm,
hearts and compassion that we have, to sit down and figure out the solution. And we can. And just think, how exciting it will be for America to hit the reset button. How
yeah,
exciting it'll be for us to say we're going to re-engage the world. We want to solve this climate issue using both government and research and education and private sector investment, and solve these big problems, solve inequality. I mean, that we could be entering a very, very exciting time for our country. And
yeah.
you can call me Pollyanna, but
I'm
that's
with you.
how I feel. I think it could be exciting.
I'm with you. I think 2020 has been a really difficult year for just about everybody I know. And there's a possibility that both the challenges of COVID, the challenges of our current presidency, that cloud passes, and that there's a lot of new energy for a certain kind of reboot that might not have been here otherwise. So I'm
Yeah.
with you, Tim, that I'm holding that possibility, and
Yeah.
that vision, and that sometimes shit has to get really bad. We have to be kind of knocked up against the wall until we try to find a different approach.
Yeah. Well, it's my mom always used to say to me and my brother, "The Lord works in mysterious ways," and Winston Churchill said that Americans always do the right thing after trying every other option. So here we are.
There they are. Well, I know we're out of time. I know you're super busy, and really just a very deep thanks for taking this time with us. And thank you for the
Absolutely.
friendship. And thank you
Yeah.
for being a voice out there and for embodying the kind of qualities that I think are the best qualities of our nation. You know, I think if we look back at our
Thank
nation
you.
has a very sordid past, if you will. The worst of humanity and the best of humanity has been expressed. And
Yeah.
just a deep bow to you for continuing to hold this space of integrity and hold this space of possibility.
Thanks, Soren. Always great to be with you. Let's make it happen.
All right, let's do it.
All
Take
right.
care.
See ya.